sometimes when I'm trying to write a scene, like I'm doing an artillery scene, if you've ever been there and fired the round, that slap of the boom when it comes out, you don't get that on TV. You don't understand what that feels like to get that overpressure. And
What's
then
really
another thing
neat
when
is
you're shooting
seeing the
artillery,
round traveling through the sky. You can
yeah,
see the little black
yeah,
dot.
you can see it and you can hear the round going shooting, when it hissing off in the distance, like, oh, that's so cool. When I was at FA training, they put us in a bunker relatively close to the impact area, and they walked in rounds to the point where we were getting shrapnel hitting
Oh,
the
jeez.
the bulletproof
Bunker.
glass there.
Mhm.
And you see really quick which of your fellow lieutenants really want to be in the army and which ones don't. Like we had the rounds were just getting walked in a little bit closer. We hear the tink, 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 tink of little bits of shrapnel hitting the bunker. And some guys were freaking out. And other guys like, closer, bring it in closer. And like, oh, okay.
I want to make
Calm
sure this
down, buddy.
glass works. Check that out.
Drop troopers fall through an endless sky. Military science fiction contest. Free action in the system on fire. Military science fiction contest. Short stories every Wednesday. Military science fiction contest. Discussion, interviews, reviews, and rants. Military science fiction contest. Load up, troopers on the hit and jump gate. Military science fiction contest. Discussion, interviews, reviews, and rants. Military science fiction contest. Load up, troop, it's time to hit the jump gate. Military science fiction contest. Free action in the system on fire. Military science fiction contest.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Military Science Fiction Podcast. Today, we are stepping into new territory with our first guest, beloved romance and cozy mystery author, Richard Fox. I kid. Oh, okay, there we go. Now you can see the things. Jeff scared me there for a second.
I thought we were done. I thought
I
that was
know.
the whole thing. Show's over.
We're also moving into
Canceled.
tech territory. So Richard Fox is the accomplished military science fiction author of the Ember War Series, Terran Armor Corps, Ascent to Empire with David Weber, Hell's Horizon with Jonathan Brazee, also our friend, as well as, although we love to call David our friend, as well as Terra Nova with our own Josh Hayes. Richard's latest book is The Men of Breton, out November 5th from Baen Books. Richard is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, and we will try not to hold that against him, and a veteran of Iraqi
Not that
Freedom.
ring.
A veteran of Iraqi Freedom and the global war on terrorism. As a former S2, I'm sure he's also a veteran of many, many PowerPoint battles that brought staff officers to their knees. And I will try not to make too many
Isn't that the
S2.
natural position of a staff officer?
I know.
No, it's bending
I mean-
over. Bending
Yeah.
over.
That's the
think-
natural position of everybody in the military.
We had another show about how he transitioned from the military to writing, and I think we really need to know how you took those PowerPoint skills and transitioned them into be able to write effectively. Richard, thanks for hanging out with us. Today we're talking about verisimilitude in military science fiction, which the dictionary tells me is realism. And this was Richard's
Sort
topic.
of.
So, Richard,
I had
you
to
wanna-
look it up.
I know. Well, I had an idea, but it's so poetic, it's so Shakespearean that I had to.
It's the feeling of realism.
The feeling
without
of
actually
realism,
being
right.
real.
It is my editor's favorite word. Every single edit I get, like, this is important for verisimilitude.
Pounding it into your forehead. So, Richard, how about would you like to tell us why, start off the conversation, and if you can tie it into the new book, that'd be awesome, because I'm excited to check it out. So
Sure. Hi, gentlemen, and everyone listening and watching.
walked in.
Real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. And it's always great to see such friendly faces. I am, as I said, I'm Richard Fox. I am a science fiction writer, predominantly military science fiction, though military science fiction, space opera, those tend to blend a lot for me. I graduated from the United States Military Academy way back in 2001 and was commissioned into the field artillery. And from there, I did my first tour in Iraq in 2003 that lasted for 15 months. And while I was there, I got smart and put in paperwork to become a military intelligence officer,
So you branch
which was somehow got approved.
Nice.
And from there, I went into the MI route and deployed for my second tour to Iraq as a battalion intelligence officer, and then had a bunch of other associated jobs during my second deployment to Iraq. And then from there, I went to my next big assignment was it was a brigade S2 in South Korea. And after a little over almost 10 years, I got out of active duty and went to work at a place called the Joint Improvised Explosive Device Defeat Organization, or JIDO, where I spent about 2 years as a bomb analyst, working the explosively formed projectile problem set and also looking at IEDs in Africa. So I did that for 2 years, and then I had a brief hitch back on active duty, and then my book started selling. And after I was working as another analyst, and then when that other analyst job came to its natural conclusion, I would just became a full-time writer. And I've been writing for about almost 10 years now, I think. Yeah. Not quite 10 years, about 7 years now.
I was gonna say you came on the scene, I think the same year I started writing, with the other Fox.
Chris Fox.
Christopher Fox.
Oh, Chris, yes, Chris.
Yeah, and
Oh,
so because I remember you came out with your series and he came out with his, and then I realized that getting into military sci-fi.
Oh no, Jeff, you just muted yourself.
you're muted, Jeff.
Oh, it's because
I'm not talking.
Well, you muted yourself before you finished talking.
No,
Yeah,
I
Chris
didn't.
Fox-
It was problematic. That was the end of the. That was the end of the. That was the end of the.
I think
that was
the
what I was
drama
saying.
that we have to start is that Chris Fox like hung his whole military science fiction thing from whatever the book was based on Richard's work, because like, oh, Richard has this great niche, I'm gonna jump in there. Which probably is not the case, but I hadn't actually thought about the fact that we had two Foxes writing at the same time. Your work is so different to me that
Which one is the fabulous Mr. Fox?
right.
George
The
Clooney.
interesting thing about Chris Fox's writing is that where Richard's books are really, really, really great on their face and they blew up, Chris's books blew up, and then he did the Right to Market book, and then everybody was like, "Oh, we need to write Mil Sci-Fi to sell a lot of books," and
And then did the exact opposite of what Chris said to do, which was
Right.
just cut and paste his book, which was basically a cut and paste of Nick. Oh, what was the guy, the old man with the 50-year-old ship, and the aliens come and they can circumvent all the technology. Except
oh yeah, the Constitution.
yeah, and so when Chris was doing was writing his trilogy, he was doing it with Right to Market in mind. Like he was doing that to prove his concept. And then the Galaxy's Edge guys and Chris consulted with Chris to get their stuff going. And yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there.
Which ties us back into verisimilitude, because I wanted to hear what Richard thinks about it. Because that's a big problem with a lot of those books, is that they, in Galaxy's Edge, they were written by veterans. I don't want to bag on Chris Fox not being a veteran, but I think especially hearing about, I didn't realize you'd worked for that JIDO organization. That's pretty interesting, and I'm wondering, like, how does having that stuff in the back of your mind, when you think about trying to write a realistic story, and then all the things you already know about character, and because sometimes that stuff can get in the way of a fun story. But how do you balance that? And what are your goals when you're thinking about that?
Well, it's whenever I'm writing, I'm not writing for people with my exact background. because like when I was a field artillery guy, it's entirely possible within the field artillery to have an entire conversation of nothing but acronyms, expletives, and numbers.
Mhm.
And if you do that for the reader, they're not going to know what in the hell you just said. So,
But it might be fun to do it once just to
Right.
show everybody what it really sounds like. If I
yeah,
have an outsider listen to him do that, because I think that would be hilarious.
yeah. If you could probably get away with that once, but then the reader is typically going to go what, and then get lost completely or just start flipping. So, really, when it comes down to the verisimilitude, it's more about giving the right feeling that was there when I was in the military and I served in the military, and not so much the exact perfect language and in terminology. So if you just sprinkle in just a little bit so that the reader feels like they're learning something. Like let's say you use a term like you're shooting 3-600 out, or I got to double check with that field artillery terms, means you're backwards. You're absolutely you're shooting 1-800 out. Excuse me. That so in artillery we shoot by by degrees, but by mils. So and there's 3-600. See, I'm even saying my numbers like artillery people do. We don't say 36,000. We say 3-600. So if you say you're shooting 1-800 out, that means you're shooting backwards.
I mean, to some degree, everybody in the Army does that, right? 2,400 hours. It's not really
Oh, I thought you meant that everybody shoots backwards.
Depends how much we had at the bar, but it's so
You know what they say, Richard? You can't spell fatal without FA
that's true. That's
or
true.
fratricide.
They let us shoot howitzers in ROTC Advanced Camp, and that was some of the coolest stuff I ever got to do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I felt like it was just a big propaganda machine for FA, but I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. And sometimes when I'm trying to write a scene, like I'm doing an artillery scene, if you've ever been there and fired the round, that slap of the boom when it comes out, you don't get that on TV. You don't understand what that feels like to get that overpressure. And
It's
then
really
another thing,
just
when you're shooting
seeing the
artillery,
round traveling through the sky. You
Yeah.
can see the little black dot.
yeah, you can see it and you can hear the round going shooting, when it hissing off in the distance, like, oh, that's so cool. And like when I was at FA training, they put us in a bunker relatively close to the impact area, and they walked in rounds to the point where we were getting shrapnel hitting
Oh,
the
jeez.
hitting the what's it called, the bulletproof
Bunker?
glass there.
Mhm.
And you see really quick which of your fellow lieutenants really want to be in the Army and which ones don't. So like we had the rounds were just getting walked in a little bit closer. We hear the tink 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 of little bits of shrapnel hitting the bunker, and some guys were freaking out. And other guys like closer, bring it in closer. And like, oh, okay.
I want to make
Calm
sure
down,
this
buddy.
glass works. Check that out.
You're
The
close.
closest I've ever been to artillery is when I was a kid. My dad was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and there's a huge artillery range out there. And from our house, we could hear the rounds hitting and going off, and even from so far away, it was like those are some big freaking explosions that are happening out there.
Yeah, when we
And then you
when we
think
lived in
about how
Pennsylvania, I
far-
heard him like that too.
You think about how far some of those rounds can travel. You kind of you get set on the thinking of like a medieval cannon shooting, and it goes a couple hundred yards, and you can see it go across the battlefield. But some of those things, I mean, they could shoot 2 miles away, and it's insane how accurate they can be that far away. You know what I mean?
For me, when I was at Fort Lewis, they had a training range there for artillery, and I don't know what unit it was, but listening to those rounds thump all night long was like rain for me. Just boom, 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 boom.
We were kind of
It-
spoiled when I was in Germany, because we went to Crete to do a live fire, and we shot missiles down over the. I was in Patriot. Richard, I told you that we shot both a missile and then a drone that was like maybe half the size of like a Cessna, and I mean that was just, you felt spoiled to be there in the ocean, but then to actually watch, you run out of the control van after you hit the engagement and watch the missile get hit, and yeah, the feeling of that, like even in training. Like having realism and realistic training, like we kind of talked about training last week and why training is so important and how to try and get that into the story. When stories do it well, it can be really cool, and to see it later on and building up, like I can really see that idea of realism, especially in training and using that experience, building that up over the, like what are some ways you build that up over the course of the story? And the army does it, you know, by letting you fire the stuff and then going, you know, then taking it down range. But you mentioned, and this is one thing I'd be curious to hear what everybody's kind of how they define this. Like you mentioned the feeling of that time. And what are some things that people associate with that? Because like my first thought, like deployment was never as big a pain in the rear as dealing with all the other social garbage I had to do when I was in command. Like people that beat their spouse, you know, beat their wives or didn't feed their kids or got DUIs, or that's the stuff that like immediately comes to mind for me. The feeling of being a leader in the army. Deploying was the easy part. But nobody wants to read about that. So I don't know. I'd be curious what everybody else thinks about that. Like, what do you associate with that realism, and then how do you try to portray it?
Never had anybody beat their spouses or kids, but he did have drunk driving. That was always fun to deal with.
Mhm. Yeah,
I think Richard kind of hit the nail on the head when he was talking about the little things making
Right.
the bigger things feel more real. If you include a lot of that stuff, especially the stuff that veterans will pick out that maybe the average reader wouldn't pick out as being real or being true to what they know, then you can get away with having enormous pterodactyls attacking your characters in the middle of a forest planet on an alien world because they understand or they have that feeling of the little things, and you can get away with throwing in the bigger things in there. I think sometimes a lot of that gets lost, and the not the verisimilitude, but the realism that people are going for. They try to make it like ultra real and like kind of not in Jeff's line of like quasi hard science military science fiction, but they go way too far in one direction, trying to make it as accurate, as realistic as possible, when there's so many fun things that you can do with mil sci-fi that you can get away with if you set them up correctly and hit the right key points for your reader.
We're
Yes,
not
you-
writing photorealism. We're impressionistic.
Mm-hmm.
We're giving the impression of realism. That's the best way I can think of to describe it. Richard does that well because I've read Ember War and I really enjoyed it. And I read your book with David Weber that you signed for me. Thank you, by the way. And you do a really good job of giving that impression without bogging anybody down the details or going the other way around, which is giving everything a generic name.
I mean,
Yeah,
when I read Iron Dragoons, you know, that's pretty far out there as far as technology and the whole situation, but it gave you a feeling of the real military in that book, even with everything as far out as it is.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I had one character who ended up, you know, he ends up fathering a child with a girl he just met, and then through some time travel, whoop-de-woo, he comes back and finds out that his pay has been docked for the last like 6 years or so, and then he goes to his lieutenant who just got promoted to captain to say, "What's going on here?" And the captain's like, he says, "I just got promoted 2 days ago, and I'm already dealing with baby issues or baby daddy issues." And it's like, there's a lot of people who have ever been in the military, like, yes, that happens all the
Yes.
time. Because you think, oh, captain, I just need to, command my men, take the objective, get all the training objectives done. No, you spend a lot of time dealing with, he did what? And, okay, which jail is he in? All right, let's go get him. That sort
Well,
of thing.
and you do a lot of that little kind of slice of life stuff really well, in that you don't dedicate significant portions of the story to that, whatever it is, whether it's a baby daddy issue or anything like that. You pay homage to it, and you give you acknowledge that those things exist without letting it bog down the story. And I think you do that really well. I mean, even with Standish, who in some books he has a bigger part to play than in other books. But even then, you don't let that get carried away as far as character wise, because you could have very easily taken it like to the max with his character, but he had some really good redeeming qualities that showed his dedication to his friends and his skills as a war fighter, but also all the other stuff where he was stealing liquor and all of that stuff that people do. And it's great that you can show that without kind of limiting the story or bringing the story to a drastic halt.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people I've run into who said, I knew Standish when I was in the military. And Standish, he's from the Ember War. And they're like, oh, and it's amazing how different militaries will say, I was in the Greek army, but we had a Standish too.
Uh-huh.
You know, the Greek people are suddenly Eastern Europeans, more Eastern European than usual. But it's so it's that kind of character. And then there's always, you know, there are archetypes of certain sorts of soldiers.
Mhm.
And like, you know, you're gonna have that one guy who's really into knives way more than he should be. And you know, you're gonna have the, you know, your collection of dirt bags and guys who never do anything. So, you know, there's all kinds of, you know, aspects of being in the military that you can put into your own fiction. And you know, for me, it's like it's good to put, you know, that kind of flavor and that color into the stories, but I always try to, you know, keep an eye on the main story and make sure the main story remains entertaining so the readers can go on and on. So like, you know, there's always that temptation of, well, I could just, you know, fill up 20,000 words with this one side story that means absolutely nothing. Which a lot of writers do, and I think a lot of readers pick up on that pretty quick. They can go, this storyline is going nowhere, and it's just kind of filler. And I don't like that. And because I don't like that, I don't write that. And you know, I don't ever really have readers saying it should be longer too often to me. So
Or you run into the problem of the people get more interested in the side quest than the actual story.
yeah, that you're kind of goofing as a writer if that happens. And but like, you know,
Brandon Sanderson.
yeah.
Well,
I
I'm
have this
curious.
the manuscript I'm working on now, it's going to have a phantom shitter little subplot, and
Did you say
that
Phantom Shooter?
shitter
Shit. Oh, shit.
Shitter.
So that's what I heard, but I wanted to know if I had heard correctly.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, a lot of times in the military, there will be a phantom shitter sort of situation where somebody's pooping where they're not supposed to, and then it's time to figure it out. And like, and I'm putting that little plot line into this next book, and I'm trying to think, how do I make it a little more relevant? But it's just, I just really want to have these uptight characters who can't identify who the phantom shitter is, but they're too proud to ask for help to find the phantom shitter. So this phantom shitter just keeps ruining their day.
I love it.
And it's always the kind of thing where I don't know if I want to know who that person is, because you'll find
Right.
out it's like the battalion commander or something. I don't even know, like some
Yeah, like who?
yes, three-star major.
Yeah. Like who
Well-
shat in the showers? And it's like no one wants. You don't really want that answer, but somebody shitting in the shower, you have to deal with it. So.
I'm curious about the new book that you have coming out. In contrast to the Ember War, where I've read most of the series and I've written in the series, and I'm very familiar with that. And the I don't want to say outlandish take, but the sweeping galactic kind of epic thing that's happening with the Ember War. What are you doing differently in this book? And then give us just a little like taste of what we might get from it.
For the upcoming book, Men of Breton, out on November 5th, it's the Odyssey meets Hammer Slammers. So you have a group of soldiers, and instead of concentrating on the wider galactic narrative of the hegemony collapsing around these soldiers, it focuses on these group of soldiers and how they have to get home while their entire space nation has collapsed into civil war. So that's that story. It's just focusing on these guys and how they get home. So it's not so much how does the how are they going to solve this political problem? No, it's these 5 or 6 guys in a tank and this really weird pilot that they picked up who drives the tank for them. And how do they, get from one planet to the other, slowly getting their way home. So that's what this series is all about. So it's much more focused on the more, we would call it the 10 level, the lower level guys. Right. Who your average kind of soldier, and then what they're going through to get through, one, to survive the battle on the first place they land on, and then what do they do to get to the next planet and the next planet and the next planet, slowly getting on their way home. So that's how it's very different from the Ember War, whereas the Ember War is, it's a galactic battle of survival, all these different alien races. This Men of Breton is much more condensed story-wise around these characters. And I had a lot of fun just with the interplay of like the 5 or 6 guys who were in this squad, tank that they end up in, and the very strange character who drives the tank for them. And this one, Men of Breton, it's in the same universe as Hell's Horizon, that was written with John Brazee. And so, and that the Hell's Horizon takes place decades before this book. So, if you read Hell's Horizon, you get the idea of the setting, and you kind of know that the hegemony that they're in is not as perfect as it pretends to be. And you kind of see that this is not going to last if you read Hell's Horizon. And then you get to Men of Breton, and like, oh, now the other shoe has finally dropped, and everything's gone straight to shit.
And this one is currently a standalone, or is it? You're thinking it's a
It's a series.
Okay.
It's a series.
Okay.
It'll probably be 5 or 6 books by the end of it.
And I know you're still writing in the Ember War universe. Do you ever find any difficulty jumping back and forth between the different universes?
Yes, I dislike that immensely. I've tried to do it before. We're like, let me write one book in one universe and then write another book in another universe. And I know some writers can do that. I find that when I get into one universe and I have to like switch gears, like everything just seizes up. And I had to like completely rebalance my mind. Like, oh, now I'm in this universe. And then I finish that book. Oh, time to go back to this other one. And I get that same, gear shift error.
Rick is the master of that. In fact, he's the only writer I know that really does it well, I think, or effectively.
Yeah.
Once wrote
quickly.
3 different books in 3 different universes at the same time every day.
Very good. Yeah, that's the skill I do not have. And Rick, you're a great man for having that. So it's so generally, if it's time to write something, I will stop everything, knock that one out, knock that whole series out. Like last year, I wrote the 3 books for the weapon series or the Battleborn series, just bam, bam, bam. And then that way, then when I was trying to switch to something else, it was a little bit easier because that series was just done.
Right.
And for me, going forward from now on, I'm just going to write one whole series all the way through, stop, do something else, and then go back to then start another new series. So
When we talk about verisimilitude and the little things, and you mentioned kind of the stereotypical characters that you can have in the military and using them to kind of like feed into that. Do you have issues or trouble coming up with fresh glimpses into those type of tropes? Like, for instance, you wouldn't want to have a Standish 2 in this series. So how do you work around that and get the same feeling evoked through the characters, but not doing like repeats of characters you've already created?
yeah, I think the difference is that you just change the dynamic between characters. So if you have somebody who's got a criminal background and is known for scrounging, but he's also kind of, he's also the mechanic, and it gives him a little different kind of feel to him. And so let's say, like in the Ember War, you didn't have too much sibling sort of issues, but in Men of Breton, there's 2 characters who are brothers.
Oh, cool.
And so it's more just if I change up the dynamic between the characters, and then that way it still works. But the thing is, archetypes have been around forever, and they always seem to work.
Right.
And people don't seem to mind too much.
Right.
And if you just don't, here is absolutely, you have a rogue character, but if you make him Han Solo, everyone knows, well, that's just Han Solo. But rather, if it's kind of a roguish archetype, and then you play around the edges as you're sculpting this character, then it comes across completely different. So archetypes
there
are
are
okay.
the pedants who don't even read your work anyways. So they're like, oh, this is a 2-dimensional character, blah, blah, blah. And it's like one person, but you have 1,000 reviews that say otherwise. It's just,
well, no one's ever you can't please everyone all the time.
or should you try?
No, yeah, it's just not going to work. If you try to do that, you're going to end up writing just absolute pablum, which everyone's going to hate. So when I'm writing, I'm not trying to like make everyone happy, but rather I know my readership pretty well, I think, and I know, well, they're going to love this. So let me put some of that in there. And
I know one of my favorite games is Helldivers 2, and the
Spill Oil
for Democracy.
Yeah.
The company that makes it has a big plaque on the wall that says, "A game for everyone is a game for no one."
Right.
And that's how I've always approached writing. I know who my audience is. I have a very specific and clear picture of who my audience is. And if you're not in that audience and you like the book, great, but it's not, it's not for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of wrong roads you can drive down, but rather it's like, okay, if I just keep my audience who loves it when robots punch aliens happy, then okay, they'll be happy.
How
What
long
are
did it
some of
take
the-
you to
go ahead.
Hmm?
No, go ahead, Rick.
how long did it take you to find your audience when you first started?
God, I tell you, it was kind of a surprise for me. It's like I had originally started off writing military spy thrillers, and here's where, speaking of verisimilitude, so I had a background in military intelligence and the intelligence community, and I wrote these spy thrillers not like how the genre normally does it, but rather, okay, I'm going to write it from the perspective of this is how it actually happens a lot more often, little bit more secretive, and a lot more in the moral issues of doing proper intelligence work. And those books flopped because I was not delivering, what the audience expected for that genre. And then somebody said, well, what, they said, well, what else can you write? A friend of mine, I went to another writer friend who's much more successful, whined about how I wasn't selling any books. And he said, what else do you like to write? I'm like, well, I could do military sci-fi. Like, well, why don't you do that? And like, oh, okay. And then I've loved Star Wars since before I could walk.
Mhm.
And then I wrote the Ember War, which I thought was like, this is just a Michael Bay movie with marginally better dialogue. And all of a sudden now everyone loves it. Like, okay, I will just continue to do this, and the readers still love it. So I'm like, I will continue to do this. So, but the Ember War is really the first time I found a proper audience. So,
Well, you've been doing it long enough now where you've tried different things. Was there a time you tried like to switch it up a little bit and things didn't work out the way you expected?
yeah, I wrote one series called The Queen of Sidonia, which is a beautiful book, and actually is a really good story. But the thing is, it kind of steps. It wasn't so much military sci-fi as it was. I don't. It's sort of sweet romance with
Say
a
didn't would that one
military
have like a
bent to
romance
it.
plot?
There was a romance subplot to it,
Yeah.
and it didn't sell real well. And it's like, like that's not what my audience wants. And so I was like, okay, you know what? That's not something I'm succeeding in writing. So I'll just leave that alone. So I just stick to, the military sci-fi, military space opera, which I got a pretty good niche there. I found an audience. I will keep hoeing that row. Get to be really hoeing. Yeah, that's the correct way to say that. Hoeing that row. It sounds awful, but if you're a farmer, it makes sense.
I was going to ask you, in addition to the character work that you do, what are some of the other things that you use in your writing to pull in that feeling in your books to make it true, other than just the characters and everything else? What other things do you use in your writing for that?
Yeah, for me, a lot of the things that really matters is the pacing. And for the readers to see, okay, they understand this is the problem that's in this book. And then they understand here's this book's problem, and then they know by the end of this book that problem will be answered, and then a new problem will arise. So, and then as the verisimilitude, as I'm writing down the plot, then I can just kind of see where, I can have them complain about military food here, or I can have them complain about the transport here, or I just kind of see like where are those those slower parts in the story where I can like, okay, let's inject some something interesting for the readers instead of they just sit there going, well, we got to sit here for 6 hours. What do we do? I don't know. Rather, if they're sitting there for 6 hours, they start playing the movie game. I don't know if you guys ever played that game when you're in the movie or when you're in the military, where somebody just says a movie, and then it's your job to name an actor or actress from that movie. And then the next part is you name another actor or actress from that movie, or a movie with an actor and actor that was in it. So like you say, The Matrix, and somebody says Keanu Reeves, and then they say Carrie-Anne Moss, and then they say Memento. So it just goes on and on and on. So that's the movie game. And we played that when I was in Iraq.
Mhm.
So like
Or,
maybe there's
or-
a time I could like put that into a part of the story. And then it becomes kind of a running joke where somebody's always like, he wasn't in that movie, and you know it, and like it was, or those complaining about some like it was animated, it doesn't count.
It was animated.
Yeah.
Or naming starships.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's. So what Josh is talking about is in Terra Nova. There's a part where they have their spaceship that they've gone off to go rescue someone, and it doesn't have a name yet. And then the lieutenant in charge, or excuse me, the warrant officer in charge of the situation says, "Oh, let's ask the soldiers to name it." Which I think anyone who's ever been around soldiers is like, no, don't do that.
Marty McFartface or
Yeah,
Buddy
yeah.
McFartface, whatever.
And so you had so what ended up happening is a bunch of these gag names for the ship got put into this hat, and the person who's reading the names off just gets progressively angrier as the names get more and more ridiculous. And that scene worked.
Oh, it was
That
great.
scene works so well. And like and like you can just kind of like see, oh, that's where that would work. And you just kind of had to be aware of when things like that can come up, and you can put in the verisimilitude and have like a little vignette of, oh, and here's some little extra. And for readers, I know the vast majority of my readers are not veterans. So, and the vast majority of my readers, they don't want to know exactly how to be in the military, but they want to kind of feel how that kind of went.
Mm-hmm.
So if I put in, here's that experience of you're in the chow line, and the chow is garbage, but gosh darn it, it's hot, and you appreciate having hot food at the end of a really shitty day. So yeah, there's Terra Nova. And
That's a great cover.
yeah, that is a good cover. It's a good cover.
I'm biased, but still.
Yeah. And so it's not so much I'm ever sit down with the intention of here's exactly the little militarisms I want to give. Rather, I've got the plot outline, and then it kind of comes up like, oh, I can work this in here, or I can work that in there. So it ends up being organic. You can't plan to be organic, but when I'm writing and I get to a certain part, like, oh, I can fit that in there. All right.
So what are some things that I'd be curious about this for everybody too is, you've only got so many things in your brain that you remember from the time you were in, the people you knew. What are some things you use to kind of replenish that for you? Like any TV shows or things that have stood out, or movies, books?
I watched The Fat Electrician a lot.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Which
Fat
one?
Electrician's great.
Fat Electrician.
Fat Electrician. I've never even heard of
Whack
that.
bang. He's yeah. Doesn't
like
get
to
everything
watch-
right, but he gets most of it right.
I like to watch and read like documentaries about the GWOT, just from the grunt's point of view. Generation Kill, both the book and the movie are great sources of military foibles. I don't know how you want to put it, but the little eccentricities you see.
Yeah. My
There's a
favorite is the
little-
army subreddit, because it gives me faith that like the sense of humor has not gone away, and we're just passing it down to, the next generation of soldiers, and things that like all the same stuff that they were complaining about, 20 years ago, they're still complaining about.
Yeah.
So,
There was not too recently, or during the Harris Trump debate, Harris said that there are no U.S. soldiers in harm's way anywhere in the world, and it cuts to a bunch of soldiers sitting in a tent. They stop to hear that, look at each other. One goes, "Where the fuck are we?"
Right?
I saw that. I'm like, okay, the army is still the same. The army is still exactly the same, because that is the exact same reaction we would have had. And so, I see things like that. I'm like, okay, that mentality is still out there.
What is funny is that there's a website you can go to where you can track all the ships in the world and all the planes in the world flying at any given time. And there were some bored KC-130 pilots over Europe not that long ago drawing things in the sky.
Phallic symbols, you mean?
Only if you looked at the map showing their path.
Right.
Then you go back to that story from on Hadrian's Wall where they found those, pictures, and I'm just like, yeah, 2,000 years, nothing's changed.
Yeah, we're gonna be drawing dicks on stuff and laughing about it forever.
There's a movie, it came out, well, it's a long time ago now, called Jarhead with Jake Gyllenhaal, and that movie, it didn't get very good reception, but the sequence where he's a sniper and he's getting ready for his first kill, and they're so excited, and then they get shut down, and he gets that just complete gut crushing of I'm not able to do what I came here to do. That is just so true about so many things in the military, where you're gearing up or you're training for something and you're ready to go and you're on the cusp and you're getting ready to step out the door, and then they're like, ah, never mind.
Yeah. You just don't know until you do it. Well, it's like the story Richard was just telling about being that close to live fire. I mean, even the little stuff they do in basic training where you do the live fire exercise, and in your mind, like, it's whatever, 5 feet above your head, and you probably could just stand up and you'd be fine. But people just don't know how they're going to react until they're in that situation. And I think
Maybe you could stand up and be fine.
Yeah.
I know you get
Jeff would be screwed.
definitely get a haircut. But that's the kind of thing too that I think, I don't know, that's a timeless story, and talking about stereotypes of people, and I shouldn't say stereotypes, but the tropes that you were bringing up. Like, I mean, I love that idea of the mechanic. I wouldn't call him thief. I'd call him a tactical acquirer. But those are my favorite kinds of soldiers. Those are my people. So just seeing them in different situations, I love that kind of thing. I don't know.
So
fact,
in the new book that you're writing, Richard, what's your favorite character and why in the cast that you have created for Men of Britain?
I think it's going to be Felix, who's not from Britain. But he encounters the soldiers along the way, and they're like, "Oh, you're on our side. You're not trying to kill us, so just stay with us." And so Felix ends up just kind of like staying along with them, and he's a very different guy. He's from a completely different planet, very different outlook on things. So he's always going to be kind of the foil of looking at what they're going to do, and he's like, "What, are you guys crazy? We need to do this instead." So having Felix in there, I really like, because and then there's also the I don't want to spoil it, but there's another character who comes in towards the very end, and she is way different from everyone else, and she's going to stay way different from everyone else throughout the whole series. So, and like at the end of the Men of Breton book, there's this one, like, from when I was writing Men of Breton, strangely enough, I had a lot of trouble making the story work in the outline phase, until I got to the part where I realized, I can have a shower scene. And it as a shower scene it's like out of Friends. It's like, when somebody sees something you're not supposed to in the shower, and the reaction from that. And like, I don't know why, but I got to this point, like, I have a shower scene.
That's what I was thinking too.
The Men of Britain, the shower scene is the best in that part. What kind of book is this, Richard? Oh, no,
yeah.
It's totally funny.
The Men of Britain.
Yeah. It's
there's no Dina Meyer in this one.
And I kind of understood how the interplay worked with all those characters. Now I was like, now it works. And I kind of like was able to go back through the whole rest of the book and figure out everyone's relationship to each other. Like now, and suddenly the book just came together. It took a shower scene.
That's interesting, because typically, I mean, I've seen some of your outlines and they're pretty significant. I mean, I think the outline you'd written for Terra Nova was like 14,000 words,
something like that.
And basically the whole story was there. So it's interesting in terms of writing that even after outlining, you were having trouble putting things together and lining things up, and having that kind of brainstorm moment where you're like, this one thing can tie everything together.
Yeah. I was glad that happened, because it ended up making the story work a lot better. And even like when I was outlining the weapon series, I got to one point where I was like, okay, here's the big powerful guy who's behind all this stuff. Like, who is he? And then I stopped, and as I was just describing to myself who he was, I realized, this is Marker Bauer from the Ember War. And I looked at this one series, and I realized, this is a preview to it's a prequel series that exists within the Ember War. I'm like, why didn't I start with that? This could have gone a lot faster.
Wait, is it really?
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, if you read the weapon series, or with the Battleborn series, and, you realize pretty quick. Well, not pretty quick, but about halfway through, Marker Bauer shows up.
Nice.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay.
Oh, that's
Shannon's
super cool.
there, and so
that, like, extensive outlining, do you think that's something you learned on staff, and especially with military intelligence, of like, okay, who is this person, who is the enemy, what is the situation? Like, can you talk more about that and how that led you to write these extensive outlines?
Yeah, it's, for me, the reason I do the extensive outlines is I'm terrified of getting 50,000 words into a manuscript and then realize it doesn't work at all, and then I have to trash that. So I'm terrified of that happening. So I make sure the story works as an outline first, and then I look and go, okay, it works. Then I'll flush out the outline, and then I'll go back. Then I'll start writing the absolute manuscript. But as far as within, for military planning, like as the S2, you're involved in the operations order to a great deal. And when you're doing that, it's a big part of proper military planning is backwards planning. You're like, okay, we need to hit this objective at this exact time. And you stop and go, okay, where do we need to be before that? What has to happen for fires before that? What happens to happen with ISR or intelligence before that? What happens to happen with supplies before that? And you end up like, I know where I want all my characters to go. And I stop and go, okay, where do they need to go before all that? And then it kind of stops me from pushing the super easy, barely an inconvenience button during the course
Oh,
of
wow.
Wow. And so if I can stop from pushing that button, because if you ever have to push that button as a writer, your readers instantly pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And they instantly go, oh, he's just being lazy. And so I try never to push that lazy button. So, and I find proper prior planning prevents piss poor writing. So that tends to hold up.
Do you have the
you replace one of the P's with a W?
I did.
You
It's hard for
almost
us Army
got
guys
that
to remember.
all the way through. That was
gonna put
almost
it out
really
there.
cool.
I'm just gonna roll with it.
do you have the whole series for the Men of
It's a
Britain?
dream of home, right? Is that the
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have the whole series
I
planned
know
out?
how. I know the last half of the last book is done in my head, and so then it's all like, okay, I know like the milestones they have to hit along the way. I know this one character has to link up with this other sort of religious order, and I've got all that storylines already done. And like like that storyline I have in mind isn't until book 3, where all that happens. But like I know how the book series ends. So now it's just
So
okay.
it's only going to be 3 books?
Say again?
Say it's only going to be 3 books?
It should be 4 or 5.
Oh, okay.
So I mean,
Main trilogy, I believe that's what they call that.
yeah, it's not a trilogy. It's the story has to be a little bit longer than that.
Well, that gets to a little bit of a sausage question that I had, or making the sausage. So you have transitioned to working with Bane. How is that working out for you as far as, you talked about having the whole series done, on the Kindle side of things, or working with certain other publishers want everything done before you even hand it over. And that's just really market driven. Is that affecting, is that working out for you professionally to work on, with somebody like Bane, or do you see yourself going back to doing your own things or working with a different, not to say you're going to leave Bane, but whatever, how's that working out for you?
Well, the thing with Bane and the thing with any traditional publisher is that just because the book is done doesn't mean they can necessarily just put it out there. Because when they're happy with the manuscript, well, they have to set up distribution, they have to set up time at the printers, they got to do all the art. And, I can send in the book to them, and then the book might not be published for a year or a little more than a year later.
So you're not getting paid during that time.
Well, yeah.
Right,
yeah. It doesn't, so that's a little frustrating. I realize that's how the industry's been.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it was until, Bezos and Apple just said, hey, just put your ebook up there. And then
I wrote a short story for an anthology for Bane, and all the edits got put in. Yeah, everything. Oh yeah, it's great. It'll be published in a year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I wrote a short story for the Black Library, and they said, we need this story back from you in 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, let me jump through my ass and I finish that. And then it goes to Black Library, and they said, oh yeah, it's not going to be out for a year. Like, why did you need? And then it finds out it's not going to be out until April of 2025. It's like, what? It's almost 2 years after I submitted it.
That's why so many writers back in the day, before pre-Amazon, wrote for so many different publishing companies and off, pen names to do so, because you can't make a living writing for one publisher when they're only publishing you one book every 2 years, unless they're
giving you big advances.
Right. Well, that's what I was curious about, because that shift of you've been working one way, and now, there are certain benefits to working with Bane, wider distribution, things of that nature, but you've been used to a certain, getting paid monthly, and how's that working out? Or do you see is it an experiment or what? That's kind of what I'm curious about.
It's the thing is, There's no way that Bain could publish as fast as I can write.
Mhm.
And there's not many publishers who could like, do the full traditional publishing thing as fast as anyone can write. And God help anyone that signs Rick, because Rick churns
Right.
out the books so faster than most anyone that I know. And so, it's
Not
like,
fast
I will
enough for
still,
some people.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'll still
exactly.
write for Bain, but I just realized that, okay, these books are going to come out very slowly
Mhm.
during the course of times. And then when I'm waiting for those books to come out, then I'll write my own stuff and put it out on Amazon, or I'll write something for Athon, and
So
they'll
it's going to
publish it.
continue.
Can I
Okay.
ask you something? Do you find that you can use each of those avenues to promote the other one?
Not really, because if Bain publishes a book, they don't put in the names of my other stuff that's from non-Bain.
But can you use it in marketing to like target the people who read that book in your marketing?
Well, yeah, you could always do that, but you have that option even with your own stuff.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, the people who read the Bain book may not be the same people who read your
it's
indie
true.
stuff.
It's the Bain audience is not necessarily the people on Kindle who read a book a week.
Yeah.
So my own stuff appeals to them, and then the people who go to the bookstore and buy their hard copies, the Bain covers that sort of audience. So, but I think the vast majority of readers right now are on Kindle, and they're loving Kindle Unlimited, just because for $15 I can read almost anything all I want.
Right.
So you have
Well,
your
I mean,
big readers are captured
I
in
think
that.
I think Amazon sells 90% of all books that are sold.
There are
So
two.
that includes hard copies as well. I just wonder if there's any way for you to target the people who buy those Bain hard copies of your book on Amazon and advertise your independent stuff to them.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to do. I mean, I would if you could go to like Amazon ads, and then like I just aggressively target my Bain books, putting my
Yeah.
other stuff on there. So, but then even that could work. But normally I think that if people read one of my books with Bain, they go, "Oh, this Richard guy, he knows how to write. What else has he written?" And then they go to the Amazon box, and boom! Oh, look, there's like 70 other books out there from this guy. Let me go. So.
To the people who, for all the people who poo-poo Kindle Unlimited, Amazon's the world's biggest bookstore, and Kindle Unlimited is the second largest bookstore in the world. So it's worth having books in.
Do you have 70 books, Richard?
About that, something like that. It's close to that. So
I'm curious.
Rick leaves to go write 71.
I know.
Yeah.
Dang it.
I just finished 76. So I'm okay.
Boom.
Just
I'm
dropping
curious
that out
as,
there. Just letting that. Just saying that.
as we kind of wrap up a little bit for the viewers that may be trying to get a start in mill sci-fi and or maybe have written a couple of books. I would hesitate to say you're the godfather of the new mill sci-fi, but you definitely put it on the map in some aspects. What would be your advice to a brand new writer, or even maybe a writer that's written one or two books in the genre that are really looking to up their game? What would be your advice to them in terms of writing?
yeah, read the genre. Read everything you can that's popular in the genre. And so that way you kind of know, if you realize there's 10 things that work in military sci-fi. And if you can like pick out most of those things, then you know what the readers like. And you guess what? Like if you're going to write military sci-fi, it's like opening a pizza restaurant. You got to serve pizza. Okay, you open a pizza restaurant, people come in there like, it's just cheeseburgers today. No one's gonna be happy with that. So look at what makes the genre work, and then give readers what they expect, and then give them a little bit something extra.
Right.
You got to give them enough something to go, oh, that's interesting.
The same but different.
Keep them engaged. If you give them the exact same story that they've read a million times, they're gonna bail on you like a third of the way through. But if you got to have just give them some sort of twist, a little bit of extra flavor. So now it's a pizza, but the toppings are different. Oh, this is the artisanal pepperoni.
It's spicy pepperoni.
It's a cheeseburger on a pizza.
Yeah, so you got to do the thing you need to do really well, and then give a little extra. and then
Just
the
don't
reader
serve
can
them
play the-
Hawaiian pizza. Don't do that.
Yeah,
I
no.
don't like
Oh,
pineapple.
Hawaiian
Why not? I
pizza.
love Hawaiian pizza.
That's a nod at J.R. Hanley because he hates pineapple. on
I
it.
know.
I love Hawaiian pizza too. I don't really understand that. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, my last question, which is kind of tied into this, is what do you see as the next, 5 to 10 years for MilSF? Like, what are you excited to maybe explore, or would you be excited to see other people writing about?
I think we're going to end up seeing a lot more drones, just because now people look
Not
at
in my
war and they're
books.
like, they're going to look at a military sci-fi book and they're going to go, where are all the drones? Because
It's one of our
all the
tropes. Rick hates drones.
yeah, and there's going to be lots of drones, and there's more roadside bombs can be there, and probably people are going to start expecting to be having AIs fighting these battles. So it's you kind of got to explain why there's no drones, or go all in with the drones. And for most of the us older farts who didn't have who didn't go to war with drones, the first thing they're gonna do is find a reason for there not to be drones. And there's actually this really cool system out there called Leonidas that uses a very fine EMP beam.
I was
It
just reading about that
melts-
yesterday.
Yeah, it melts incoming drones, and it's like,
I love it
hey,
already.
just throw those.
C-RAM seems to do a
on
pretty
your
good job too.
Say again.
The C-RAM seems to do a pretty good job too.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
hitting them with heavy microwave energy. So, I mean, that's a question because lasers, I mean, we had lasers back in the day, but it's always about how we power them. So I was wondering the same thing, right? Exactly on sharks.
You
But
need
like how
sharks with laser beams on there.
in the YouTube videos I was watching yesterday, and which could be a whole other thing we can talk about, but like how are they powering these things? Like all I saw was the trailer and the weapon system. I didn't see a generator behind it. So I'm kind of curious about how that's working. But
Big ass diesel generator.
that's pretty much what they do.
The
So-
finest military tradition.
Yep.
In 10 years, everybody's going to be like, wow, do you remember that 2-year period where everybody was just all gaga about drones? Now they don't use them anymore,
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll just
and
be
then
tiny.
also a more autonomous weapon systems, because Elon Musk, he's already got robots that can walk around and do stuff. A couple years from now, it's like you give Elon's Optimus a machine gun and go that way.
Until the autonomous robot armed drones wind up killing a bunch of your own people, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden they won't be used anymore.
We've seen those movies.
They
We've
can do
all
that
seen
now.
those movies.
I mean, soldiers can do that now. So I mean, what?
That's true.
Right.
until the
But you can-
Marines put a
you can
box
punish
over
a
their head
soldier
and
who
walk
does
right
that.
up to the thing.
You can punish a soldier who does that.
Yeah. Boston Dynamics. I didn't realize Boston Dynamics got bought by Hyundai. And I don't know that they've kind of fallen off the radar with everything they're doing, but we digress. Richard, is there anything else you wanted to share? Men of Breton is out November 5th. And is there audio as well? Let me see that. I think
It
it's
should be out on the same day as well.
Awesome.
Does somebody say, Men of Breton, will you stand for this?
Richard, do you have a website people can find you at?
Yes.
Yeah, just go richardfoxauthor.com. And if you're on Facebook, just put in Richard Fox Author in the Facebook search bar, and boom, there I am.
Yep.
But it's for everyone out there who's who's into military sci-fi, and you're thinking about writing, and all of a sudden all you've heard me is referring back to my time in the service. You don't actually have had to have served to write good military sci-fi. I always bring up Tom Clancy, who was a real estate agent, but wrote amazingly good, very accurate.
He's an insurance salesman.
Yeah, excuse me, real estate agent.
Okay.
David
And
Weber as well was not in the military either. So,
Yep.
and he writes fantastic MilSFPOD.
Yep. And the thing is that both, well, at least for both of them, they just did their research. They went to the library and did their research. So there's all sorts of material out there for anyone to be able to write this stuff.
You don't even have to
did-
go to the library anymore.
Oh yeah, even not even that. It's so I had to do 4 years of military college, 2 deployments, and then 10 years total in the Army to get to this point. And I would much rather just be able to let me just go to my normal YouTube channels and then pick up everything, because then I still have a good back and knees and shoulder and all the rest of it.
Right.
Not service related, Richard. You know that.
Yeah, that tinnitus doesn't go away. Yeah.
If anything, serving
that's-
might make you not want to write about it for like 5 years, which is how I was.
Also,
Like,
Yeah.
screw
But
this.
tinnitus is getting worse as I get older, by the way.
What'd you say? I couldn't hear that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
What?
exactly.
This whole show should have just been us going, huh?
What?
Right?
What?
Yep.
Speak up.
who's in the artillery?
All All right. Well, thank you for hanging out with us, and
Yeah,
I
pleasure.
would love to do this again sometime. So,
Definitely.
please check us out on the Discord. Let us know when you've read Richard's books. We'd love to hear what you think of it. I'll be picking it
Please
up on
like and share our podcast. Like
yeah,
and
do
share.
that too. We're almost at we want to build those subscribers up. So please,
Like, share, and subscribe.
exactly, do all those things.
Smash it.
Smash that like
I need some of
button.
those like splashy graphics. So, all right. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks,
Later.
guys.
Okay.
Drop troopers fall through an endless sky. Military sound and science fiction podcast.